In this video, I'm going to show you how I trigger my worship band's click track, backing tracks, and lyric and lighting automation using a Looptimus foot pedal. I'm also going to show you a cool setup I have for my tech team to be able to trigger different songs and transitions in my Ableton Live set list from another computer running Ableton Live in the tech booth. It sounds a little bit confusing, but after watching this, it'll make total sense to you. You'll understand the benefits of why I would run this setup, and you'll have clear direction on how to get it up and running at your church. Coming up. Hey, my name is Jake Goslin. I'm the creator of Churchfront.com, helping you lead gospel-centered and tech-savvy worship. If you haven't already, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on any of our latest content to help you grow yourself and grow your church. If you are interested in learning how to get going with Ableton Live, then you're going to want to check out Worship Leader School, which contains my complete Lead Worship with Ableton program. I take you from zero to hero, step by step, click by click. I'll show you how to master this software for a worship ministry setting. So go to worshipleaderschool.com and join today. Here in front of me, I have two MacBook Pros. This MacBook Pro right here is the MacBook Pro that sits on stage with myself and the band. And we plug it into our sound system by going into our digital snake, and we have a 4-output audio interface we're using right now to get the audio channels back to the main sound console. This MacBook Pro over here is the computer we use in our tech booth. It runs Pro Presenter for lyrics and video. It runs MyDMX 3.0 for lighting. It's also running our Soundcaster app for wireless in-ear monitoring to my iPhone. And more recently, I've also began to run Ableton Live on this laptop, and you'll see why in a moment, because even though we run Ableton Live tracks and cues from the laptop on stage, I'm actually going to use our media laptop to start triggering the laptop on stage. And again, you'll see why this is important in a few moments. It's really epic. First, I want to talk to you about how I trigger Ableton Live tracks as a worship leader from our platform. Right here, I have my Looptimus Midi Foot-Controller, and this guy is like the industry standard for triggering click and tracks and other things in worship. And it works if you're using Ableton Live or Prime. You could probably even use it with a playback app. It's a really powerful and versatile foot controller made specifically for a worship ministry context. So here's how I have my Looptimus Foot-Controller configured. On the Looptimus, you have up to 20 banks. You have 6 buttons here, and you can make 20 banks of those buttons. I actually only use 2 banks, and I use the number 1 bank, and then I use the all access bank. When you hold that down for like a half second, the next button, it creates an all access bank that you can access from anywhere, no matter where you are in the different pages of banks. And on the first bank here, that's what I have queued to the beginning of each of the songs. So song 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So you'll see when I hit this, it's going to bring it to song 1, and then song 2 in Ableton, and song 3, and I'll even zoom in here so you can see a little bit more of what's going on. Song 4, song 5, and song 6, etc. So that's what the first bank does. Then when I'm in the all access bank, this will queue up some important things like my play button. So of course, I wish the Looptimus had like one more dedicated button that didn't change with banks. Kind of like how they have the stop button up here that's dedicated. I wish they had a dedicated play button, but I'm often not having to actually queue up the play button that much in worship, because most of the time I'm just triggering like different locators in Ableton Live. So it's not a huge deal. I usually have to use this like twice in the whole service. Generally just once. So I have the play button here. So let's say right now it's at song 6, the postlude. So if I press play, it's going to play that, but I'll stop that. I also have the pre-service settings. So when I hit this, it's going to go to my pre-service settings in Ableton Live. I have a locator for that, and I'm going to zoom in on that real quick for you here on my screen. You'll see that I have a clear bail to logo cue here. Then I have an audio playlist that we pull up, and then we have house lights, and then we black out the stage. And that will control everything on the media computer. So I'll go ahead and cue up the pre-service. I'll play that, and look how the media computer changed to the pre-service stuff. I could go to our hosts section of the service, and I'll play that. that'll queue up everything that needs to be ready for the host slides and so on. I even have it set up so I can hit this button and this is going to queue up the bumper video for the sermon. And then we have sermon. And then we have the pads towards the end of the sermon. I'll go ahead and stop that. Let's bring it back to the host section here. That's how I have my Looptimus set up. In setting all this stuff up and configuring it in Ableton's really easy. You hit the MIDI map button up here, you select what blue parameter you want to map to a button, you click on it, and then you click the button on the pedal, and you're ready to go. So that's how I'm using the Looptimus on stage to trigger everything. One issue that we've ran into as a church plant, especially since we have just one laptop running Pro Presenter and lighting, is sometimes our transitions are a little rough. And a lot of that is due to the fact of having to like click through the different applications from Pro Presenter to the lighting software to queue up the right scenes and the right slides. It can just take a couple seconds to do that, but then in turn, that makes the transitions pretty rough. So with Ableton Live, you really can automate all these things however you would want. You can send automation cues to the lighting software and Pro Presenter, and that's easy to do when I'm triggering things, you know, within Ableton Live that's running on the laptop on stage and it's plugged into my Looptimus. So I, as a worship leader, can go in and say, okay, let's go ahead and queue up the pre-service settings, and you'll see it does just that right there. It pulls up our logo, brings up the pre-service music. But recently I've been trying to figure out how do we make this easier for our tech volunteers to not have to click around so much on their computer. So I realized we can actually use Ableton on our media computer to do this. So here's how I found a solution to that problem. And I want to show you the end result of this first so you can kind of get like what I'm going for here, because it's kind of confusing to explain, and hopefully this makes sense. So now my media volunteers can open up Ableton Live on their computer. It's running a completely different project than the Ableton Live laptop on stage. And this project on the media computer that my tech volunteers will be running has some basic MIDI cues that's then communicating with the computer on stage, which is then sending automation signals back to the tech computer for Pro Presenter and lighting. It sounds kind of confusing, but once you see how it's set up, it's not too bad. And then if there's a better way of doing this, let me know in the comments. But this actually works pretty well the way I have it set up, and I like it a lot. So looking at our media computer here, we have this Ableton Live project that I created called Ableton Live Production Cues, and in it you'll see we're in session view, and I created, you know, a dozen or so clips within session view here, and each of these clips contain MIDI notes, which then what happened is I mapped these MIDI notes to my Ableton Live setlist template on the computer that's running Ableton on stage. So now what's going to happen is, if you'll see, if these different letters and keyboard commands, I actually have them written on the clip. So see, P is play, S is stop, A is pre-service settings, B is host, C is bumper, D is sermon, E is pads, and then numbers 1 through 6 are the song numbers. So watch what happens if I press the C button, and C is bumper. So I have Ableton Live selected on this laptop. I'm just going to hit C, and it queues up the bumper video. I could hit B. I'm just going to hit it on the keyboard, and that pulls up the slides in the lighting for the host part of the service. And the cool part too, again, I'm gonna make sure you can see all this, is it's actually queuing up our lighting software as well. So I'll put the lighting software right there. I'll move this over. And now watch both the lighting down here change, and you can see the scenes change, and what's on Pro Presenter change. So let's go back to our pre-service settings. So we black out the stage lights. We have just the house lights going. We have that pre-service music. And then let's go to the host settings. And then let's go to the bumper settings. Here it's going to black out the lights on stage, play the bumper video, dim the house lights. And then at the end of the bumper, right when our pastor's ready to go, all we have to do is hit D for sermon. And it brings up the first sermon slide, brings up the sermon lighting, and it all happens instantly. And then towards the end of the sermon, when our tech team is ready to fade in some pads in the background, they'll just hit the E key right here. And then that's going to trigger the pads to start playing on the laptop that's on stage. I also have it set up so our tech volunteers can trigger songs within our worship set list. So watch this. I'll hit the key number 1 here, and that triggers song number 1.
2, 3, 4.
So the light's blacked out. Get the intro playing
Intro.
here.
2,
Built
3,
up, and right
4.
here, everything is queued up. Background, lyrics, and lighting. Let's go to song 2.
1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Again, we have the blue light scene here. We have the blue background and the lyrics coming up. So I just recently implemented this setup. I'm super pumped about it because now our production volunteers don't have to try to do acrobatics, trying to click around on the screen to get all the right lighting scenes up and the right lyrics and slides up as well, especially during those transitional moments from going like the host time to the sermon bumper to when our pastor comes out on stage to preach. All that can happen with just like one keystroke. I hope that makes sense. Again, this is kind of hard for me to explain. I can actually hit S here, and that's going to stop the Ableton project. But that's the beauty of Ableton, that, you know, with all this MIDI communications and all the stuff you can do with the MIDI network, you can, you know, communicate from Ableton to Ableton. So again, what we have happening is our media computer's running Ableton. It's sending out these triggers to our computer on stage running Ableton, which is actually running the tracks and all the lyric and lighting cues. And then those lighting cues go back to the media computer to actually trigger the lyrics and lights. So that's the latest with our setup of how we both trigger our cues from the Looptimus that I use on stage, and then we also trigger cues from Ableton that's running on the computer in our tech booth. To learn more about using Ableton Live in worship and how to network all these computers together over Wi-Fi and how to implement this in your worship ministry, make sure you check out worshipleaderschool.com and join today. I have a complete library of online courses that are going to walk you through everything that makes what you saw here in this video today possible. Thanks so much for watching. If you found this video helpful or inspiring, hit that thumbs up button and share it with your friends in worship ministry. You can check out some related videos right over here, and don't forget to subscribe to the Churchfront channel so you can continue to receive all of our latest content to help you grow yourself and grow your church.